everyone, and welcome to Life Hacks for Working Moms, the podcast that helps you overcome the overwhelm, embrace the chaos, and cultivate a life you love. My name is Megan Strand, and I am so excited to be here with you today, and even more excited about my guest today. A couple of our previous episodes have touched on something really important, dare I say essential, to having your home run smoothly. And today we're going to dig into that topic, and it's all about fostering independence. Primarily in your children, but, maybe with your spouse and even yourself sometimes. Today, it is my great honor to have literally my oldest and dearest friend on the show, and her name is Wright. And outside of being my personal lifeline to sanity, she's also a speech-language pathologist, she's a wife, and she's a mom. Hey, Kira.
Hi.
What I want to talk about today, first of all, I was hoping that you could start out by just sharing with the listeners today what your work-life situation looks like, because I think it's a little unique, and I always like to showcase things that are maybe not your traditional 9-to-5 job. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Unique and not simple. It always takes
simple, no.
A couple minutes if I really want to dig into it. So I am a speech and language pathologist, and I spend about half my time working for a school district in far eastern Oregon. And that means that I am on site there about 300 miles from Portland, 4 days out of every month. And so that has kind of created its own little rhythm in our family. So I travel once a month there. And when I'm here, I'm mostly working from home. And I have a home office and spend a lot of time in my car.
So when you're out in rural Oregon, how many hours that week are you working? It's a lot, right?
So that week I might put in 50 to 60 hours. And so it's a half-time job. So then the rest of the month when I'm here, it averages out to about 30 hours over 3 weeks. So, even though it's a half-time job, I spend a lot of time that 1 week that I'm on site and much less time the weeks that I'm here. And then I kind of compensate for that with some other projects that I have and some private clients on the side. And I'm part of the leadership team for my agency here. And so that it all evens out to about full-time, but I have a lot of flexibility in what I do and where I do it.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's really cool. And I always like hearing things that are different. So thank you for sharing that. Now, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I typically don't stick to a, 9-to-5 or 8-to-4 or whatever schedule, because I have kids that need to be driven around. I've got one child that I drive downtown, and I like to exercise sometimes in the middle of the day or in the mornings. And so I do a lot of shifting my work around.
Totally.
It's very typical for me to be working at 5 a.m. or at 10 at night.
Yep.
And I'm always looking for ways to keep track of the work of the time that I actually spend on work and make sure that it all evens out in the end.
Absolutely. Fits into the nooks and crannies too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so the reason I wanted to have Kira on the show today is because I have, for some reason, a strange great fortune of having lots of speech-language pathologists in my life. And I've actually been on 2 mission trips to different countries and watched some of these women. They've all been women that I've observed, not to be sexist, but they've been women, really work with some kids that have some significant communication deficiencies. And it's occurred to me that there are a lot of really interesting things that speech-language pathologists do that can be useful to just all of us in daily life, because they're really talking about communication. And a lot of my conversations with Kira, just as a friend, have to do with fostering independence. So I'm going to ask you, Kira, put on your professional hat as well as your personal hat, and talk a little bit about why you think fostering independence is so essential. And well, let's start there, and then we'll dig into a couple of things that might be a little bit more specific.
Okay. Well, it all seems much more clear with a professional hat on than a parent hat. As a professional, you don't have all the emotional attachments and all the, chaos of your personal life, and you can see things very clearly and see that your goal is to work yourself out of a job. So, in the in the beginning, when you're working with a client, you're going to have to give a lot of support and create a lot of systems. But eventually, you want to teach them the skills that they can learn and give them strategies for dealing with the challenges they might still have eventually, so that they can do it on your own, because obviously they're not going to have a therapist their whole life.
Well, but if you think about it, as a parent, you're trying to work yourself out of a job too, and to a certain degree, right? Like at some point you hope that they live on their own independently, right?
Right. Which is why probably you see from a distance, some of those things could be useful in our personal lives and our families.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and let's talk about a couple of those things, because I think these things are really, really useful. And some of this sort of borders onto different realms. And I think that's okay, because it just is okay. It all kind of works together. Yes. So, but one of the things I observed you guys doing, I think it was in Costa Rica, was doing visual picture systems for kids that were on the autism spectrum. And it was basically sort of setting a visual expectation of, here's what we're going to do before we, walk out the door today. And it was things like, we're going to brush our teeth, and then we're going to put the toothbrush away, and then we're going to wash our hands, or whatever it was. Right. But it was all represented with pictures. So talk a little bit about how you've done something like that within your own family to use something that's visual in a way that's more effective than maybe just saying to your kids, like, okay, I need you to go do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K before you leave the door. Right, because we've all been
there, right?
Yeah, well, we do that every day.
You're like
and
thinking
they never listen.
I need you to do this and the other. And, that inevitably leads to kind of a blow up of like, Mom, why do you keep yelling at me for these things? Right? And a lot of times it's the same things every day, right? It should not be a surprise to anyone that you have to brush your teeth this morning.
It's a surprise to my 12-year-old every morning that she has to brush her hair, and I don't understand why. Maybe I need a visual system.
Right. So, I think there's a lot of evidence across many fields that checklists are a way to, make sure that things get done. And that a lot of times when there's other demands or there's distractions or there's, just things that come up, those regular things that you should do every day, that you have done every day, sometimes get forgotten, and that's why you end up at work without your cell phone, or on the road, at the grocery store without your wallet, or
bra
whatever.
On.
For example, because it's not that you didn't know that you needed to bring your wallet. You bring your wallet everywhere you go. But when there's other distractions, that's one of the things that gets forgotten. And so I think with younger kids, it seems obvious, or more obvious, that you would use pictures for a kind of picture schedule or a picture checklist. My kids, when they were little, we had the bedtime routine, which was very simple. I mean, it's like put on your pajamas, brush your teeth, pick out a story. But allowing them to have that visual checklist and go back and see, instead of me saying, go brush your teeth now, go get your toothbrush, brush your teeth. It was, go check your schedule, go see what's next, right? And that puts some of the responsibility on them. Oh, I can figure out what's next. Yeah. I can keep track of these things myself.
Now, do they, in your house, like when they were younger or even now, if you have like a visual system, first of all, are you just drawing little picture?
That's what I was doing.
Because they were little. You guys professionally have really neat picture tools, so you're not doing.
Look for clip art or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I like involving the kids in making their own list.
Oh,
and
that's
so
a good idea.
It gives them a little bit of ownership. Like, just you decide what order you're going to do these things in, or you decide. Do you want to draw just a toothbrush? Do you want to include toothpaste on that? Is it important to, give yourself a reminder that you have to put toothpaste on the toothbrush? No. Okay. That's not that important. Okay. Then, let's just draw a toothbrush with toothpaste. But you could easily, use Google and look for clip art or take pictures of stuff and print out your own pictures and use it on there. But I guess what I was going to say is that for kids, like before they're reading, it seems more obvious to use pictures. But I find that even now that both my kids read, even then, pictures, they're a little bit more accessible, especially, if there's emotion involved in the moment, or I know, or when there's, or when just things are a little bit more chaotic, or just when, the house or the wall or the board is a little bit cluttered, a picture might stand out a little bit more.
And where are you
professionally,
putting
we
these
talk
things?
about-
Where are you, like where,
Well,
if you had a
okay,
checklist?
so we have a whiteboard. So a lot of times things go on the whiteboard in the kitchen. The bedtime lists or the morning lists, those, I let them find a place to put them in their room. My daughter likes to put it right by her door or hang it on her bed. I mean, I will say, I think it works well to switch it up too, because I don't know about your house, but my house, like if something is in one place for very long,
it's just like invisible.
Yeah, you just step right over it. It's not there anymore. And so sometimes it works to switch it up. I mean, I've certainly tried things for myself to like make sure that I leave with everything I need. But inevitably, if something's by the door for too long, my checklist for what I need to leave the house, I don't even see it anymore. So I feel like you got to keep switching it up.
Well, and that's sort of that out of sight, out of mind tenet. But literally, if you keep something in the same place for too long, it becomes out of sight.
Yeah. And that's also why I like the whiteboard, because nothing stays there for very long. We might make a list on the whiteboard. It might include pictures. It might include, some visuals, but then it gets erased and you have to make the list again. So you're like constantly rethinking your list.
Okay. Well, and I definitely want to talk about the whiteboard. So let's talk about the whiteboard. So give us just kind of what's the whiteboard and when did you start using it and why did you start using it?
Okay. So, let's see. We went to some trainings with a fabulous expert in executive function, Mary D. Sklar, who I think
she's fabulous.
Great guest on your podcast.
She would be a great guest.
She's really good, and she taught us a lot. And she probably taught us a lot, like that we'll be able to use over many, many years. But I feel like we're just kind of pulling strands one at a time. So the whiteboard was one thing that we implemented. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago. And she kind of said, you got to have a whiteboard. You got to have a whiteboard. You got to be able to make lists. And people have to be responsible for their own list. And so, we had a whiteboard in another part of our house that had become kind of one with the wall and wasn't getting used.
I have one of those.
Yeah. Right. It seems like a good idea when you first put it up, but, moving it into the kitchen, really changed the way we used it because now it was kind of accessible to everyone. Kids love whiteboards. Like what kid doesn't like using a dry erase marker?
Totally.
And so we started, and probably what we've been most consistent about is using it for our weekend list. And so on Friday afternoon, coming home, and the kind of thing, like even if Friday afternoon you want to just relax and not think about all the demands that you're going to have on your weekend, just to make a list of what those are so that everybody's aware. And really, honestly, it goes for me and Peter too, the adults in the house, because if I know in my mind, I have like this big project and I really want to carve out some time to catch up on the work I didn't do this weekend, and I need to do all the yard work and, all those things. If the rest of my family doesn't know that, they might be counting on me for other things.
Right. So what you do is, okay, first of all,
everybody makes their list.
This seems like a silly question, but we've tried the whiteboard and it did not stick in my household. And I think the reason it didn't stick is because it was like we'd prop it up on a chair.
Yeah. So we actually have ours hammered into the wall.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask. Okay. So you have the hammer into the wall. So on what, like Friday night over pizza, you guys sit down and
it's usually
make
like
your
while
list?
We're making dinner, we, just everybody needs to make their list. And it's not, it's probably something that's going to get refined and adjusted over maybe the course of the evening or maybe even during the weekend. I'm always thinking of like, oh yeah, and this. Oh, and this. But everybody makes a list. And so for my middle schooler, that means taking out her planner and looking at like, make sure you get everything from your planner onto your list so that there's none of those Sunday night,
freakouts.
Forgot about that. For my third grader, it's remembering things like, I need to practice the ukulele. And, okay, how many times do you want to do that? And so you can put, check boxes. So sometimes, they add things like, I want to, I want to read. Okay, how many hours do you want to read this weekend? I don't care. But, sometimes my middle schooler puts, 5 check boxes. I want to read for 5 hours this week. Okay.
So a checkbox equals an hour? On the whiteboard?
Sometimes, usually a checkbox equals just like a session, like a time of reading. So like practice ukulele, maybe he'll put down 2 checkboxes because he knows he needs to do it both days. or something like that.
Okay.
But then, and not so much for my third grader. He's not, I mean, he kind of gets it, but my middle schooler definitely estimates how much time she thinks it's going to take her. And that's mostly for the work, I've got to take notes for my humanities topic. Okay. How much time do you think you're going to spend on that? Well, I've done most of it already. I think maybe a half hour. So she draws a little circle and colors in half of it to be a half hour. Sometimes she might break that up and say, well, I want to do, I've got this poster that I have to put together. It's going to take me a long time. It's maybe going to take an hour and a half, but I don't want to do that an hour and a half altogether. I want to do it in 3 half-hour chunks. So she'll draw like 3 little colored in half circles.
Right.
It kind of helps. It helps me know, what.
Totally. Is she going to be doing this all weekend long, or is it going to be
or can we kind of fit it into little chunks? And for me, it's been good too. A lot of weekends I have like
grocery shopping, 5 hours.
Exactly. Meal plan, grocery shopping. Or I used to just put groceries. Well, now I've gotten better and I put like meal plan. That's like a half hour. Then make grocery list. That's probably another half hour. Grocery shopping. That's probably 2 hours.
That's so true.
It's so easy to underestimate.
So when I say 5 hours, I'm not actually kidding.
You're not kidding. No. Well, I don't know about you.
Put away groceries when you get home. I mean, literally, that stuff can take forever.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes. So everybody has their lists, and there's lots of kind of estimating. And then can I go on to the next step now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So if it seems like it's pretty straightforward, kind of depends. We might from there say, all right, well, why don't you put stars or S's or dots next to the ones that you want to do on Saturday, and then, choose which ones you want to do on Sunday. That might be the extent of our scheduling if we have a lot of time and I feel like, things are good. If it's a weekend where we have a lot of things scheduled, or if I feel like, I can already tell that there's resistance to the things that have to get done, and I can tell, this is going to maybe take a little bit more. No, then we might get out our schedule and
like actually map it out.
Yeah, and we have like a daily schedule that we can print out that has like hours of the day, and it's really, I think, eye-opening to see, well, okay, so you want to go to Kung Fu on Saturday morning. Well, you got to eat breakfast before that. Then there's some drive time to get there. Then you're there for an hour. Then you come back. There's drive time and snack. Well, there's like all of Saturday morning.
Totally.
And if you're saying you want to get these, 3 things done on Saturday, where are you going to do them? If you also have this other plan for Saturday afternoon, and you have this thing that you want to do Saturday night, and really let's not plan any work for after 7 p.m. or something like that, then, you might actually have to work to get that in. And the benefit then of having, kind of a rough schedule for all of these things that you want to get done is if you get to Saturday evening and you look back and you realize, I didn't do that, or wow, I worked for a half hour, but I didn't finish it, then you got to find another place for it, so you can look at the next day and try to fit it in instead of just panicking, I guess.
Well, and so I'm just going to throw a little devil's advocate piece in here, because my husband would say, you're totally scheduling the entire weekend. It's so uncomfortable, and I don't like that. We should just be spontaneous. What do you say to that?
Okay, so I would say...
What do you say to my husband?
Schedule some time for spontaneity. But I don't know. Personally, being spontaneous is a lot more fun if I know that I can get what has to be done.
Right.
And I guess the risk, and maybe this is an issue for your husband, I don't know. The risk of just wanting to be spontaneous is kind of turning a blind eye to that stuff that you have to get done, and just deciding, you know what, I'm not going to think about it.
I'm just not going to do it.
And it's not there.
And I'll be stressed out on Sunday.
It's not there because that makes me stressed to think about it. And I guess what I want to teach my kids, and what I have to remind myself to do, and my husband, is like, let's find a spot for it. And if I've already carved out a spot, and I know that Sunday at 4:00 I have an hour set aside to finish this, then I don't have to think about it. I can go be spontaneous and do whatever I want right now because I know it's taken care of.
How much of the original plan stays as it is? You know what I mean? Like, how much are you like, oh, oops, we didn't get to that, or oh, oops, that actually took 3 squares instead of 2 squares. And so are they constantly, like, are your kids going back to the whiteboard throughout the weekend? Or, I mean, how does...
Definitely back to the whiteboard. Probably probably as great about going back to the schedule and rejiggering it and like finding a new place for this. I mean, that's the theory, and that's what I'd like to say happens, but it's probably not that perfect. But I don't know. Even if you have one spot that's scheduled for it, at least you tried. And then you might say, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. But definitely we're crossing things off the whiteboard, and kind of some people that's like a sense of accomplishment. Like check it off and leave all their finished things up there.
Yeah.
But then by the end of the weekend, and inevitably, I'm the person who has the most unfinished things at the end of the weekend, because a lot of mine are like food prep. So I'm like, I didn't do that. I'll have to do that tomorrow night or something like that. But we can see what's been done, and it's a great sense of accomplishment. Look at all we did.
Do you put fun stuff on there too? Like if somebody really, I want to watch a movie, I want to go ice skating or whatever.
Yes. And some of the things that get put on there, I mean, like my list, some of the things that get put on there are like kind of dreamy things,
I want to read a book.
Yeah, I want to read a book. Oh, I want to play outside for 5 hours. I want to play basketball 6 times this weekend or something. I mean, yeah, well, that's why those things might get scheduled in, but they might be kind of extras too.
Right.
For that spontaneous time.
Right. Well, and that's when we started using it, and I'm clearly not an expert because we stopped using it, but now this conversation makes me want to start again. I remember thinking, like, I want to make sure we have those fun things on there so that, because what was happening in my family was that, especially like my younger one.
Doom.
No, she was just sad because she felt like she couldn't do anything fun. It was all chores. I have to do my chores and I have to do, and it was like, no, you got to put the fun stuff that you want to do there too. But then we can kind of see how it's all going to fit together. So,
well, and that honestly, that's kind of a common refrain at our house is like, oh, I don't want to do it. Okay, you don't have to do anything right now, but you have to tell me what your plan is. You have to be able to tell me, like, when's your plan to do this? Then I'm going to be totally comfortable with you doing whatever it is you want to do right now, laying down with a book, going outside and playing, watching a movie, whatever you're doing. I'm going to be fine with that as long as I know when you have scheduled to work on this. And so, because then I don't have to nag and well, what about this? What about this? Because I'm notorious for that, like breaking into fun time and saying, well, what about your ukulele?
You're such a nag.
Yeah. But I won't. But I don't have to do that if I know that there's a time scheduled for that, and I can count on them following it.
Right, and I think that's the big benefit. So, what have you observed through your own children? You've done this for a couple of years now. So, 2 questions: What have you observed in your own children just through this process? And then, let's answer that one first, and then I'll come back to the other one.
Okay. Well, I mean, you set your sights really high, and then you kind of settle into maybe what's a little bit more realistic.
Totally.
So there was a time when we kind of felt like we had to do this for every day, and every afternoon. But, as it turns out, your days become kind of routine. You have your Wednesday afternoon often looks the same. And so, maybe that's it, that it just became a routine. We didn't have to do it, or maybe it was just too much, a little overwhelming. But we've kind of settled on doing the weekends, and people, I think it's a good skill to be able to make a list of what you have to do.
Totally.
And I love that both my kids can easily make a list. And they might forget things. They might need somebody to look over it. Oh, but what about your math or something? But they're both very comfortable with making a list of what they have to do for the weekend.
And what about the time estimation piece? Do you feel like they're getting that? I feel like that's a hard skill. I don't feel like I have that skill down.
No, I'm very, very poor at that.
That'll take me 10 minutes, 2 hours later.
Oh, I can do all 20 of these things today. Yeah. So that's something I think. But I think there's something about learning that you're not very good at it, imagining that this will take a half hour and then finding that you've been working at it an hour. I just think that's nice awareness.
Absolutely.
That sometimes things take longer than you think they will. And also, the other piece of that is like, just because you're sitting in front of it for a half hour doesn't mean that it's done. Like, it doesn't matter if you scheduled the half hour and you sat with it for the half hour. If it's not done at the end of the half hour, you still have to find other time to work on it.
Right.
And I have to deal with that every day with my work.
Absolutely. Yeah, agreed. All right. So if somebody were going to try the whiteboard system and the time estimating system, because you really do have a couple of systems sort of,
I guess that are there multiple systems
layered in, but it's all good. So what would your pieces of advice be, knowing, you've done this, like I said, for a couple of years? What would your starting points be?
I guess, mostly I'd say just be easy on yourself and like feel good for making the list and, kind of step back from did it all get done or didn't get done. I guess that's part of separating process from product or something like that, of course you want to get stuff done. That's why you made the list. But the skill that the kids are learning, if we go back to fostering independence, the skill that they're learning is kind of being responsible for their own responsibilities, making a list and checking things off. And so if you keep that in the back of your mind as like what you're teaching and separate that from, did it all get done? I think that's
the thing to focus on. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you have a spouse that is totally on board with this and works with this as well. But
that is another thing, though. I think it works a lot better that we're all using it.
Yeah.
Rather than making it just
your whiteboard,
place to
Kira's whiteboard.
Yeah, well, or just the kids. Like this is my place to give you assignments and tell you what work you have to get done.
Totally. Oh, that's ugly.
Nobody likes that. I wouldn't like that either. I guess that's like having a honeydew list or something. Yeah. Here's all the things I want you to get done.
I'd like to make one, but I would not like to be given one.
Right. But if we can all admit that we have lots of things to do, and some of them are really fun, and and it's really fun to be able to put something on all of our lists, right? Oh, we all want to go do this together. Let's add it all.
Awesome.
I don't know, but I do think that's a piece of success is like having everybody involved in it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. It doesn't mean that you couldn't do it if it was just you and your kids, but I think it would be a lot easier, especially in a family like yours where you guys have, you're both working from home and trying to fit work in different nooks and crannies. So, I would imagine that there's a little bit more of the schedule wrangling that has to go on. And, Peter's working on the weekend sometimes too. So it's, those little pieces that have to get fit in and scheduled. Awesome. Well, this is so fabulous. Can you believe we've come to the end of our time already? We've actually even gone over. I told you. I knew it was going to go by so fast. I didn't
we'll have to talk about homework some other time.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's talk about that quickly.
Okay.
So, talk about homework. Because homework is new for me. Because I've got Montessori kids. So this is like my first year of doing homework, and it's a little stressful.
So I guess, maybe it's not that big of a topic because it really fits into what we were talking about. I guess just the one little note that I'd made to myself about using homework to foster independence was the piece, and maybe it's kind of what I already was talking about, separating that process from product. Like sometimes with homework, I feel like the process that I want to teach with homework is letting kids take responsibility for their work. And then like the piece that's added because it's homework is like that problem solving piece. What do you do when you don't know what to do? I am not going to do your homework for you. And I've maybe been lucky that my kids for many years had homework in Chinese and I could not do their homework for them. But it made it very clear that they needed to, I could do a lot of things, right? Just like the whiteboard and the getting stuff done for the weekend. I could give them the structure. I could help them make the schedule. I could teach them how to estimate their time. I could give them all the materials they needed to cross things off their list. And so similarly with homework, I can make sure they have a space. I can make sure that they're well fed and rested and alert and ready to work. I can make sure they have, whatever office supplies they need to do their homework. But then they need to do it. And if it doesn't get done or if they don't know how to get it done, then I can help walk them through the process. Okay, is there anybody you can call? What part of it is it that you don't understand? When could you ask your teacher about that? Let's practice. Let's pretend I'm your teacher. What are you going to ask me? Which is great when they're asking in Chinese. Because I just say, oh, that was good. Yeah, that's a good question. Right? No, really, what are you going to say? Okay, and how is she going to answer you? How are you going to know when you have your question answered? So
I love that. And it's interesting having that Chinese language barrier, because then
makes
you're
it all
able
just
to
more
see
clear.
it. Well, yeah, you're able to see it more clearly, because I think the inclination, and tell me you haven't seen parents who have clearly done their kids' projects because they're beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, that's not a third grade project. That is a adult Martha Stewart project or something close to it. Yeah, no, I think it's actually really, really interesting. And that's something that...
And as we've kind of moved into English homework with my middle schooler, it's
it's easier for
harder.
you.
But it's harder.
Oh, because you could teach. Yeah.
I look at it and I'm like, oh, I would be a rockin' middle schooler because I could do that.
You would be a rockin' middle schooler.
Right? But it's easier to see that line of, this is your work. And I can help you figure things out, or I could help you kind of clear up the questions that you're going to ask. And I could even help you maybe figure out where to look to find the answers to those questions. But
it's not teaching.
Right.
I think you were the one who...
And inevitably that leads to like all the, that's not how my teacher told me to do it, or that's not how we're learning it.
Because who does math like they teach kids to do math these days?
Even though I'm like, but it's right. I know this is how you do it. Look at the answer. That doesn't ever fly. It's a much better solution to say, look how you figured that on your own. Or look how you've left it undone. And now your teacher's going to know that you don't understand it. That's the important part.
Yeah.
Teacher does not need to know that I understand it.
Yeah, that's the lecture I got at the beginning of this year, because as I said, my 12-year-old is just now starting to do homework. And the teacher said, I was concerned about her writing. And she said, don't edit it for her, because then I don't know what she can't do. And I was like, oh,
then
duh.
You see the work in class and she's like, this doesn't stand up at all to what she's bringing home from home.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all, I think part of fostering independence is having the parents realize that that's part of the process versus always wanting to jump in and solve and provide and give. Versus
again, that focus on
back.
the process and less on the product.
Is that a speech-language pathology thing, Kira?
I don't know. That's been my personal
mantra
over the last couple of weeks. Like, I have to let go of
it's not
product.
well, yeah, because you're looking for perfection and you're looking for something that's right and complete, and sometimes it's just not going to be, and it's going to have to be okay.
Because if to get that, I have to completely just ditch the process, and it might end up being just really hard and ugly and full of conflict and frustration. And like, what's that teaching them?
Exactly.
Yes, we got the perfect product out of it.
And we're ready to kill each other.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Well, I love it. This has all been fantastic, Kira. Thank you so much. If people would like to get in contact with you, is there a good way for them to do that? I know you're kind of, you're sort of stealthy.
I have a website.
Oh, that's right. You have a fabulous website.
Yeah, we can use that.
Let's do that.
KiraWright.com.
KiraWright.com. We'll include that in the show notes. And you can find life hacks at LH4WM.com. That's LH4WM.com. And thanks so much for joining us. Please subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or find us on Stitcher. And as always, we'd love your comments and feedback. And thanks so much for joining us for this episode. We'll see you next time.